The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the expressed written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Looking forward to a good Cardwell tonight, just so you know.
Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
Station atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Wednesday, we'll make that Thursday, February 15th, Friday, February 16th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond, and this is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, live from the Great White North in the Caribou region on top of the snowy mountains of central British Columbia at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 people strong, listening nightly on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on the Fringe FM. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to revolution.radio and donate today. Now, we are all over the social media aspect for this show. We are on Periscope, live, right now. We're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. We are on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website, of course, is spacedoutradio.com. We have a GoFundMe account going on right now. Go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. That's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. If you want to help us build a brand new studio here for terrestrial radio, that would be absolutely wonderful if you could help out. You go to our website, spacedoutradio.com. We also have our encounter online that you can read up on your latest paranormal, strange, and odd news. You could shop at the Spaced Out Radio store, read up on my latest blog, or watch great videos from Tim Doyle's UFO Seekers, Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV, and so much more. Whether you sit on the right or the left politically, it really doesn't matter. For the last 20 years or so, we have all been affected by the trials of the few who pressure the many to think their way and their way only. We are almost at an epidemic stage where anyone who poses an opposing question is automatically labeled. I can tell you firsthand, in the last 2 weeks alone for me, I've been called misogynistic, racist, a bigot, Cro-Magnon, and, I don't know if this is an insult or not, typical white male. Why? Because I questioned why Canada was changing our national anthem to become more inclusive to Prime Minister Trudeau and his team. Never mind the wording that has changed that was dedicated to the 61,000 soldiers, Canadian soldiers, who gave their lives in World War I and World War II. Now, that doesn't seem to matter anymore to these newer generations. This was quickly followed up by people kind. Ah, yes, people kind. We'll get to that in a little bit. As well, the insulting of a Canadian veteran by our esteemed Prime Minister. So, tonight, we have Jamie Sexton from the Rebel Planet on. We are going to talk about people kind. We are going to talk about globalism and how it ties to political correctness. Jamie's website, soon to be built, therebelplanet.com. Jamie, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, my friend?
Doing good, brother. Good to be here. Thank you.
Anytime. It's always good when you come on for your monthly visit to the show. Now, I know you're not really used to reading into Canadian politics because really we're a boring country. We're pretty much a boring country. But, you know, did you give yourself a laugh? Did you give yourself a laugh over the whole people kind thing?
Yeah. You know, it's funny because, you know, you and I had spoken about it earlier in the week, and the interesting thing for me was to see how much it affected you and other Canadian friends that I have who lean a little bit more to the conservative way of thinking. I think the interesting part about that for me was that while it struck you, you know, in a visceral sort of way, it seemed more tame to me. And I guess that's because we've been dealing with that sort of dynamic here in the U.S. now for quite a few years, you know, with all the political correct stuff. And so it was interesting to see that, you know, some hot buttons were pushed with that sort of behavior over there. But for us, you know, for me, it does play right into it, the political correct stuff. But like I said, we've been dealing with that for quite a while over here, and it's very frustrating.
No, and I can fully understand exactly where you're going with that. We're going to get more into people kind later because I got some audio from that. But one of the big things that has really happened in this country is the fact that a lot happened politically on the week here. And it started off with a week ago this past Wednesday, where it became official that Canada's national anthem, which sang True Patriot Love in All Thy Sons Command, has been changed to True Patriot Love in All of Us Command. Now, the Liberal Party was basically saying it's 2018, it's time to bring all-inclusivity into the national anthem. What they seem to be forgetting is the original lyrics that were written with some English term, all ye dost, you know, command or something like that. So it was politically correct and all-inclusive. The lyrics got changed shortly after World War II, where they were changed to "In all thy sons' command" for the 61,000 Canadian soldiers who died on the front lines of World War I and World War II. Canada seems to have a short memory, or many Canadians seem to have a short memory. Do you think national anthems are a stage for political correctness?
What do you mean? You mean, are they fair game? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
My way of thinking, for my own personal taste, no. I don't think so. I think that when it comes to things like national traditions, flags and anthems and statues and slogans and things like that, I think that to truly respect history and to respect the past and things like that, I think sometimes you have to appreciate the time that something was written, appreciate that it's part of traditional fabric, and accept it for what it is. I understand the argument of inclusivity. I get that sort of. I get the literal argument of it. But, usually what I find with so much of the politically correct stuff that happens in the world, in other words, the push for it, my experience with that and what I've observed is generally not actually the groups that are seemingly being protected that are being affected. You know what I'm saying? In other words, I'll see, for example, in our country, I will see the African American community, the black community, being used as political pawns so often, especially for the left, to further their agenda. And yet, when I early on, when something becomes an issue or a political pawn, or a political talking point, early on, I'll notice that, I'll talk to my black friends about it and other people. And what I notice is that, no, man, I'm not bothered by that, or I'm not bothered by this phrase or by what this or that or the other thing. It seems to be almost a manufactured agenda. I believe it is a manufactured agenda, but even if I didn't believe that, just on face value, it doesn't feel real. It feels forced, like someone has a social agenda. And later on, of course, then an organic effect takes place. So it's almost as if the organic part of something follows the manufactured part of it. Does that make sense? In other words, the media and whoever is pushing an agenda will lay it out there and make an open suggestion that, oh, this is offensive. And then the next thing you know, then there seems to be a real organic growth of that idea. Oh, yeah, I'm offended. Or, yeah, I should be offended. Or, yeah, we should be saying that differently. When, a month before, it wasn't on anybody's mental radar, emotional radar, or anything else. Didn't bother anybody. But once you bring it to the front, oh, yeah, it's a problem. And I think that I subscribe to the idea that most all of this political correctness, whether it be in Canada or in the U.S. or anywhere else, is really a social agenda. It's an engineering project for globalists. That's what I believe. And that's really where I think it all comes from. And we can get more into that. But to answer your question in a nutshell, I don't think really that people are, if you would have asked Canadians 6 months ago, are you bothered by the national anthem? They would have looked at you and said, "What are you talking about?" You know what I mean? But now all of a sudden, now it's a hot topic. So now there's this organic thing that's going on with it.
Well,
You follow me?
I know exactly where you're going, and let me break this down for our listeners a little bit longer. Up here in Canada, we have what we call private members' bills. This was brought in by an MP, a member of Parliament, who was elected in. He suffered from Lou Gehrig's disease and died shortly after getting into election. So, or a few months after, his private member's bill was brought up when the House of Commons, so it would be like your Senate, was not in session. The Liberal Party of led by Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, pushed it through without any vote or any debate whatsoever from any of the other parties or politicians that were sitting in chambers at that time. So what happened there was no say. They immediately said, this is our new national anthem. You have to sing it this way. And they did it in perfect timing a week before our athletes flew to South Korea for the Olympic Games. So that is the setup to this. That upsets a lot of Canadians because, you know what, the one thing about Canada that I don't like is we're not as proud of our history as you guys are down south. Okay, everything that you guys do down south, at least this is an outsider's perspective, is built around the history of the country, the things that are good.
Right.
Okay, that's not done up here. So here I look at it, and many Canadians are looking at it, that we have 61,000 dead Canadian soldiers who died in World War I, World War II. Part of that anthem was for them. It was cut out for all inclusivity.
Right.
I have an issue with that. Many Canadians have an issue with that, and we're not allowed to say. That's not very democratic, Jamie.
I agree with you. At the very least, no matter what side of that issue you would stand on, I do wholeheartedly agree with the idea that the citizens should have had a say in that. That's one of those things when political maneuvering happens behind the people's back, you realize at those moments that you're really not living in a true democracy. When the government just starts doing things that the people should have a say in one way or the other, I think that is alarming in itself. Not even necessarily the changing of the anthem, just the fact that the public was circumvented in the process, and we see more and more and more of that globally, especially in Western culture. Because in Western culture, we've for decades, we've had a real sense of freedom. A lot of it may be illusion, but we've lived under the umbrella, illusion or real, of freedom, and we feel like we have a say in the things that happen in our culture, in our country, in our communities, and in our lives. And when things happen, even matters like this, which some people would probably think were trivial, but it doesn't matter if it's more trivial issues or even more substantial issues. When things that should apparently seem that the public should have a say in, when the public is circumvented in those processes, I think what happens is a lot of people, especially if you're on the other side, the losing side of the issue, it really strikes home, and you begin to realize, wait a minute, we didn't have a say in this. We didn't have a say in this. It was like when healthcare was changed here under Obama, whether you were for it or against it, we didn't have a say. The people didn't vote on that. We didn't even get to read it. It wasn't read out, and there was this big discussion about, we were going to get to see everything, and we were going to get to see everything in the bill. And then Nancy Pelosi came out with her famous announcement, well, we can't read the bill until we pass the bill. So that in itself was shocking. And if you saw the size of that bill laid out, you realize that even the lawmakers who passed it they couldn't have possibly individually read it and understood what was in it. So it seemed to me that is one particular issue, for an example, on our side of the border, where we feel like legislation, again, whether you were for it or against it in the windup, really doesn't matter. We feel like the public was circumvented. And so I can relate to your feelings and frustration on that for sure. It happens. It's beginning to happen more and more, like I said, in Western culture, where supposedly democratic societies aren't getting to exercise democratic processes. Things are just being imposed upon us by governments.
What would the American reaction be if the Star-Spangled Banner was changed, or God Bless America? Where, let's use God Bless America here for a second, a beautiful song written for Kate Smith. And, you know, I still go back and watch it, but where it says, stand behind her and guide her, if they change that to stand behind us and guide us, or something along those lines.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is that, you know, I'm glad you used that particular song and that particular phrase as an example, because just taking a snapshot of that example that you just used, I would answer that by saying they wouldn't change it. Why? Because there is no male agenda being pushed right now. You see what I'm saying? Males aren't being pushed as victims right now. It's not a social agenda. It's not a political agenda. So that particular phrase would be safe in today's political climate. You see what I'm saying? And I know that wasn't the root of why you asked that question, but I you know, it struck me as an interesting way to make that point, that there's political agendas behind things, and it's not. Again, I do believe that it's not always organic. In other words, there aren't necessarily masses of people out there who are actually offended by certain things or affected by certain things. I think most people, if they weren't manipulated by media and political agendas and things like that, are generally free thinkers and intelligent enough to have pretty thick skin or have, you know, a good perspective on things. In other words, they can say, you know, if we wanted to look at this song and pick it apart, or this anthem or this phrase or this slogan, you know, we could. You know, you might notice there it says this or it says that, but they wouldn't do that. They would be more apt to say, well, you know, that's a traditional song. It doesn't offend me. You know, you and I have talked about it before, Dave. I'm not a religious person at all. I don't practice any religion, and I don't, you know, practice any, you know, religious beliefs. But other people's religions don't offend me. You know, I don't get offended if someone else is praying, or if someone else is going to church, or what their slogans are, or their beliefs, or their prayers. To me, that's a personal thing, and it means something in the context that it serves in their life. And I think we live in a society now, you know, in a lot of countries and a lot of cultures, where people are beginning to be offended by everything. And we've got to fix this, and we've got to correct history, and we got to say this a different way. And I think it's just getting really, really complex, and it's getting really, really out of hand. It's beginning to fracture societies very badly. And I think it's manufactured. To be perfectly honest with you, I think there's an agenda to do this. I think there's social engineering at play all over the place on many, many different topics right now, that serves to fracture societies and pit people against each other. That's what I see in all of this. More than anything, that's what I see in all of it.
We saw it a lot in the United States a year ago where they were tearing down statues, getting rid of the Confederate flag, making it illegal to fly. How has that gone over in the United States with that amount of erasure of history?
It was another hot topic that pitted people against each other and stirred up emotions and other things, and it was a process that we had to experience and go through. The funny thing about it is that, not funny. The odd thing about it is that you're not hearing any of that right now. I mean, you hear other issues that are similar, racial issues, cultural issues, but that particular issue is not in the news right now. So what I glean from all of that is that if the news is busy selling a story, they manufacture the hype. And I think they're guilty of serving as an instrument to do that. Those statues, for example, that you were talking about here that were torn down, whether you interpret them one way or another, I guess that's up to your own, process, your own thinking process. And that's fair. That's what being free is about, being able to have your own thoughts and process information your way. But I will say that those statues were up for years and years and years and years and decades. And everybody walked by them day after day after day. And I can guarantee you the people who were out there tearing them down and spitting on them and kicking them and other things like this, a month before that became an issue, they probably didn't even pay any attention to those statues. They probably had no clue they even existed. But when it became an issue, when it became an agenda, then they got emotionally affected by it. And reacted accordingly and chose a side. I'm either on this side of the issue or I'm on that side of the issue. And I think the media is guilty for pushing agendas. And typically, if I'm being blunt, typically the media pushes left-wing agendas. It's just the proof is in the pudding. That's what they do. Political correctness, erasing history. I just see so much of that. And I have a lot of theories as to why it leans to the left and this or that. And I'm not slamming the left. I have a lot of really, really intelligent, well-spoken, well-researched, educated, very dear friends of mine who are very left-leaning. And we have, some pretty heated discussions at times and some pretty informative discussions at times because we listen to each other and we talk and we exchange ideas. But I honestly see that a lot of what's going on in the world is social engineering. And I believe that all parties are manipulated in one way or another. I think they're using every political avenue they can to manipulate this thing that way and this thing that way and everything else. But I think they are guilty. I think the media is, and other entities, not just the media, but largely the news media, is guilty of pushing what I believe is a global social engineering agenda, which is unfortunate because I think what it's doing is the end result here is it's serving to fracture our society, and we buy into it because we all get emotionally affected by topics, and whatever side we emotionally choose, it seems natural. It seems organic. But, we weren't fighting over these things a month before, 6 months before, a year before. Now, all of a sudden, we're all fighting about something. And you have to kind of look beyond the emotional effect of something to consider that you might be being manipulated at times. And that's unfortunate, because the end result of having such a fractured society makes us weak as a people, makes us weak as a democracy, makes us weak as a country, as a community. And whenever we fracture, we become weak, and then institutions like government can impose more things on us. The more fractured we are, the more power they have. And that's just an old formula. That's just, that's an ancient formula of cultural power, is fracturing the masses so that the body of authority has more power and control over them.
And we'll get more into the globalist agenda a little bit later on. I do want to take, because there is 3 parts to this entire story. It started with the national anthem, and then it got to this. So I'm going to play you guys a clip, and I'm very curious, Jamie, to get your reaction.
Religious charitable organizations have in our legislation so that it can also be changed, because maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look
we would like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly. Yes, thank you.
We can all learn from each other.
So that clip right there, where the Prime Minister cut off a young lady who said the word mankind and said, we no longer use the word mankind, we prefer people kind, it is much more inclusive. Is that getting to the height of ridiculousness of political correctness?
Well, it would be it would be right up there near the top of ridiculousness. But since I deal with these topics every day, to me it's just par for the course of things that are going on. I haven't really discussed it much in any of the writing that I've done lately or anything else, but I'll be getting into it soon. But, there's a lot of things that go on in our institutions, like our universities and in our government institutions and things like that people aren't even really aware of, like certain things that university professors aren't allowed to say or do, if you ever looked at one of these professors' curriculum, in other words, whenever a university professor teaches a course, they're always prepped with a certain curriculum and guidelines of how to teach that course, and the new rules and this, that, and the other thing. And more and more of these professors are having to really prepare more for that, for what they politically can and can't say, rather than what they're actually supposed to be teaching the students. And it's getting to really ridiculous proportions at this point. Like, you can't, a university professor can't even address their class anymore as, a professor can't walk into class anymore and say, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." They can't say that anymore for fear they will get sued. That's kind of where we're at now. So that's policy, that's so I'm used to this ridiculousness that you're addressing here. And like I said earlier, it was interesting to see you so passionately affected by it when your prime minister came out last week and said that. Because these are the things that are very frustrating to a lot of conservatives here in America, is that we're watching this sort of PC culture really erode our entire structure. And it's sad because I don't think people really understand what's really going on here and what the end game for all of this is. It's pathetic.
You know what's interesting, Jamie? Not a single national broadcaster brought up what followed. There was an online Twitter battle between Paul Joseph Watson, known as the Rebel for InfoWars, who basically called Justin Trudeau an idiot, and then it was followed up by Gerald Butts, who is Trudeau's right-hand man, because every politician has a right-hand man. This gentleman, Gerald Butts, he then tweets out, the lesson to take from this joke being torqued by InfoWars and other alt-right Nazi friends of the rebel is they're paying attention. Game on, #Team Trudeau. Piers Morgan then jumped on the fact that you just basically called anybody who disagrees with you a Nazi. So now we're getting into the whole game of what's a Nazi now? Like, is this where we have gone? Is this where it goes to from now on? So Piers Morgan responds on Twitter, A, I am not a Nazi. B, it wasn't a joke. C, if you're one of @Justin Trudeau's chief advisors, no wonder he's making so many gaffes. So it turned into a huge, huge war that the Canadian national media on television did not cover.
Right. Well, I don't usually find myself aligning with Piers Morgan. It's a rarity for sure. But these things do come full circle sometimes, and I think that that's kind of inherent in the with liberals anyway. And I'm going to say liberals, but the left wing agenda, the social engineering, is that those agendas and all of that PC stuff usually ends up being a snake that eats its own tail. Because if you just follow the logic, just the basic logic of the fact that of the idea that you can't say certain things. I mean, aren't we really just back to book burning at this point? I mean, if you can't express yourself, good, bad, or ugly, right? If you can't express yourself freely and speak the way that you want to speak, if everything that you say or write or type or publish is censored, aren't we? We're really not living as a free society at that point, are we? I mean, and that's really what all this leads to, because we could say, well, you know what, this phrase is racist. We should ban this phrase from our culture and from our speech. And 85 to 90% of any population, any given population, may agree with that sentiment. They could all sit around and nod their heads and clap and go, yes, we agree with that. That is a very offensive term. We should get rid of that term. And it all sounds wonderful until another group doesn't like another phrase. And then another group doesn't like another phrase. And before you know it, you can't say anything. You can't be critical. You can't do anything for fear that you're going to offend someone. And one of the our First Amendment is freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Well, if you consider the fact that freedom of speech is basically to protect unpopular speech, because popular speech doesn't need protecting. Everybody speaks popular speech, doesn't need protecting. It's unpopular speech that needs protecting. I always like to use the analogy that If we were all living in a neighborhood and there was a guy, we'll call him Mr. Scrooge, lives at the end of that block. And he's a real bitter old man, he's a racist and he's mean to children or, whatever. Well, you may say, listen, children, don't go by Mr. Scrooge's house. He's not a very nice man and he says ugly things. Well, we don't want him to hurt anyone, but if he wants to have his beliefs, racist beliefs or anything else, have them in your house. That's your right. Think what you want. That's an unpopular idea. Nobody's going to like the guy. We don't have to like him, but we can't really tell someone else what to think. We can't tell them what to say, and we can't force that upon them, because the minute that we get into the practice of starting to do that and start telling people what the proper thing to say is and this, that, and the proper way to think, when we get into the business of that, it becomes an endless slippery slope. And at the end of it, the cost of all of that is we're really not free anymore. We have to protect the right for everyone to think for themselves. There's always room to learn. There's always room to grow. Maybe somebody might take the initiative and go down and try to befriend Mr. Scrooge and have discussions and debates with him personally. But we can't force that. We can't force people to think a certain way, and we can't force people to talk a certain way. When you start getting into the habit of that, you're giving your freedom away piece by piece. And before you know it, you've sold out your entire freedom for a well-meaning idea.
Is it beyond, Jamie, liberals and Democrats and Republicans and conservatives? Is it beyond that where there is this sect of fascists out there who really want to make sure that anything that can be corrupted will be corrupted in order to cause that type of controversy?
Yeah, I mean, they're the manipulating groups. Okay, the manipulating groups of I call them the globalists. They have a global agenda. In my opinion, they want a one world government. They don't want countries to have sovereignty. They don't want people to own things. They don't want people to have individual rights and individual freedoms. They want control. And yes, ultimately, they don't care about left or right. Ultimately what they care about is control. But they can't really get there until they have us bickering amongst each other over trivial matters. And some of the matters not so trivial. But either way, they want us to fight amongst each other. Because anytime you have flux, okay, you can have movement. And so you have to have movement to have change. And that's what they like to do. You can have a left and you can have a right, but usually the left and right, when not being manipulated, right, they find a way to find common ground, right? You have an idea, I have an idea, we'll meet in the middle and we'll compromise. That's a normal human function, to work, within your differences. But when you have someone outside, a third party, as you suggest, who's manipulating those differences and agitating things, what you have is cultural and social flux. You have a lot of movement, and it can be any topic, it can be any hot topic, and the media will stir it up because they own the media, and politicians will stir it up because they bought the politicians, and all these other institutions that they oversee and manipulate, they all stir it up. And then you have flux and movement in society. And when you have that movement and when you have that flux, that's when they come in and start to impose their policy. That's when they start to make change. Because when they see, when a society is strong, and cohesive, even if we're left and even if we're right, you know what I mean, and we have those differences, we can still find strength and common ground, even though we have differences. We can figure it out. But if we're being manipulated by higher powers, you know, then that's when change comes in and policies imposed upon the people without against their will. It's sort of the same thing as the Hegelian dialectic, where you have a problem, you create a problem, and you create a solution for the problem. You see what I mean? So there wasn't a problem before, but you created one. But it's not really the solution to the problem that the people wanted. People desperately want someone to fix something. So if the government, for example, created a crisis or a fear among the people, they could engineer a solution that embodies an agenda that normally the people wouldn't go for. Normally, the people would not go for said agenda. But if they include that agenda in a solution to a crisis, then the people will go for it. So there's all sorts of social manipulation and social engineering that goes on like that. And so, yeah, I to answer your question, I do believe there's a third party that sort of doesn't really care about left and right or differences in sexes or differences in races. They use that to keep us fighting against each other. But in the end game, they don't really care about those differences. They just use them to manipulate us and stir up flux. That's what they like to do.
How does that integrate, in your opinion, with social media? Because we see people taking all over Twitter to fight battles, all over Facebook to fight battles, over social media freedom to fight battles like this. Is it taking this agenda that is being run? Is social media a big part of that plan?
Absolutely, yeah. Social media has become the main driver of that agenda. And the reason it's so effective is because even though people are still being manipulated, they feel as though they have a voice in the matter. And they do. You're free to express yourself, but you're still being manipulated. So what will happen is you'll have, a certain, and I don't want to name them by name, but you know the big giants, the big social media giants. They censor things and they do their own form of propaganda and promotion, and so it's an environment that they can control well, and it's all inclusive because everybody these days has all of the major social media apps downloaded on their devices. So all the world's connected now. So of course they use those mediums. It's their most effective form of it. And the bickering is good for them, the fighting, because like I said earlier, they don't really care about the differences between one group versus another group. They just care that there's movement, because whenever there's fighting, that's when change happens. And, conservatives and traditionalists and patriots, whether you come from Canada or the United States or Great Britain or anywhere in the world, if you like your culture, you're a conservative, you want to preserve that culture. You want to preserve some of the historical elements of it, some of the traditional elements of it, some of the, the language, and all the things that make your culture what it is. You want to preserve the good parts of it. So you want to fight for that. But the only way that these strong cultures are going to survive is if we don't allow people to come in and shake everything up and impose change on us as a method to solve a crisis. So we have to be careful with that. We have to be careful. in times of war, in times of political debate. There's all kinds of ways to stir up a society. And it doesn't really matter what the topic is or the method or anything else. Whenever we're fighting amongst each other, that's when we're in danger. And it's not the fighting itself that's the problem. It's not even the arguing and this and that. Because, as a species, we're strong enough to survive that. Especially on an individual basis. But as a society, when we live under a set of laws and rules and things like that, we often don't appreciate the value of those rules, or where they came from, or why they're in place. And a lot of times we'll end up inadvertently giving away our freedoms a little bit at a time. And it's a complex issue, but again, I think it is definitely social engineering, and I think it's on a global scale. It's not, just the U.S., it's not just Canada, it's not just the West. I think it's a global agenda, and we're all being manipulated in one way or another towards that agenda. And I think it's happening in so many different ways in concert that we're not really aware of it. A lot of it because we're living our day-to-day lives, our 3/8s. 3/8 of work, 3/8 of sleep, and 3/8 of in between. And we're worried about paying the bills and taking care of the people in our life and this, that, and the other thing, that, we don't have a whole lot of extra time in our lives really to pay attention to all the ways we're being manipulated. And when you're being manipulated in such a ways that it affects you emotionally, you especially can't really see it, because a lot of people aren't willing to rise above their own emotions. They're not really willing to rise above their own bias to see how they're being affected. So it's a very, very effective way. Social engineering is brilliant when it's done correctly. And they've been winning for a long time. And the political correct stuff is one of the biggest elements in that.
But it's to the point, though, where they are absolutely hammering any type of opinion to the point where we're not even allowed to ask questions anymore. I remember when Canada invited in 25,000 plus Syrian refugees. I had no problem with that. We have the room, we have the space. On paper, we're a relatively wealthy country. Why not? But I posed the question, why is it our responsibility as Canadian taxpayers to bring these people, uproot them from the Middle East, where is home, and their families and friends, uproot them, bring them 8,000, 10,000 miles away to Canada, and that's all on our taxpayer dollar, when the top 5 Muslim nations were refusing to take any refugees, including allies like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and others. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Right.
And because I asked that question, I was lambasted. I was called racist, which I took offense to because my aunt, my mom's sister, is black. She was adopted. She's black. My cousins are black. I have an issue with that. I have also African Canadian friends. I have issues. I have a bunch of different cultures surrounding me. But that was the first time in my life I had been called a racist for asking a simple question as to, can the Prime Minister please give me a great reason as to why my taxpayer dollars should be going towards this when the Muslim nation is not even taking care of their own people, which, from what I had learned, is substandard to what the Quran says. And this isn't a Muslim thing. This isn't a black thing, an Indian thing, a woman thing, a gay thing, a transsexual thing. This is a simple question where the fact, Jamie, and we only got about 90 seconds left, it's getting impossible to be able to even question things anymore. We're not allowed.
Right. Well, you said we only got 90 seconds, so if you want to pick that up on the other side. But to quickly answer you on that, I would say that if you lay out all the cards that you just described, and that was your puzzle, the puzzle sort of reveals something, doesn't it? So they didn't send those immigrants or those refugees to Canada or Switzerland or to the UK or anywhere else that they did send them as a matter of simple economics, right? We can rule that out because, as you pointed out, those other Muslim nations that were much closer and probably could have more easily facilitated them did not do that. So you got to take that one piece of the puzzle right there and consider, well, that maybe there's another agenda, right? Why did they choose those places? So we can expand on that if you want at the other side of the break. But yes, there's probably an agenda to it. And by you asking the question, you probably ruffled, a lot of feathers. So welcome to my world. I mean, I get that all the time. Doesn't matter what I write, what I publish, or what I say. I get that all the time. You're a racist, you're a Nazi. And it's like, where is this coming from? It's because if you go up against the establishment, if you go up against the agenda, if you go up against the globalist, you better be willing to fight. And you better be willing to take the hits, and you better have thick skin, because you're going to take it on the chin every time. It's a powerful thing, and it's been going on for a long, long time. And people still really aren't hip to the full spectrum of what's happening. They're getting pieces of it, but they can't really, a lot of people can't even digest the idea that it's such a massive globalist thing.
I'm going to have to cut you off right there, okay, because we're going to have to step out for our first break of the night. Jamie Sexton from the Rebel Planet comes into this show the third Thursday of every month to discuss all the alternative news, highlighted topics of things going on, and reading between the lines, the story between the storylines. That's where we're going tonight with the Rebel Planet. 2 more hours with Jamie Sexton to go. I'm your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Lori and Fenton here, SOR listeners. Join me at UFOCon 2018 in South San Francisco, California, March 23rd through 25th, where 14 presenters discuss all things disclosure, UFOs, and aliens. Stephen Bassett, Grant Cameron, and Melinda Leslie address disclosure. Preston Dennett will present Inside UFOs. Your Dave Scott and Lynn Buchanan tell of amazing alien contact. Get tickets at caufocon.com.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lori and Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hey Space Travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience, Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Hey, this is Canadian paranormal investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to be with you this Thursday night. Tomorrow night on the program, we're opening up the phone lines to you all night long. Phone lines opening up tomorrow night. 3 hours of anything you want to talk about. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on The Fringe FM, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to revolution.radio and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Tesseradicades. Tesseradicades is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. You can view us live on periscope.tv/Spaced Out Radio. On Facebook, give our page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. And our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, or watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. Tonight, we are talking with the Rebel himself, the Rebel Planet, with Jamie Sexton. He comes on the third Thursday of every month to talk about the alternative media, what is happening, the stories between the stories. Jamie, welcome back.
Thank you, brother. Good to be back.
Oh, we love having you here. You know that. So, let's get to it. Right before the break, we were talking about the way everybody out there, if you don't agree with them, you're not allowed to ask questions, or immediately people are throwing the racist card at you when you're not being racist at all. How did that reaction, in your opinion, form up?
You mean in general? How did that become a thing? Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
In my opinion, I think it has to do a lot with Western culture. You know, the Western culture historically, you know, in the United States and Canada and the UK, nations formed by mostly white settlers earlier on. Now, later on, obviously, that wasn't necessarily true. We're a nation of all sorts of races, but traditionally it's viewed that way. And I believe that the idea is, with the agenda, to cut down that fabric. I think that they see that as the pillar of the tradition. So they need to knock that down. They need to knock down any sense of tradition, any sense of cohesion, anything that we stand on as in terms of traditional values. It has to be demonized. You have to demonize the structure. So, they like to package that in the form of white racist. So if you're white or even light-skinned, which is hilarious. Some of my Asian friends have been called white racist just because they're lighter skinned. It's to that point now. So I think that term is used, unfortunately, extremely way too liberal, and it's not a good place to be in our society where that's just thrown around so easily and freely, because not only is it ugly and inaccurate, but it's also you also sort of wear down the meaning of it, really, by displacing the meaning of what a racist truly is. You kind of wear that down in itself. But I do believe it's a tool to manipulate it's just another form of pitting us against each other. Race wars are a great way to stir up the population, especially in cultures, like the United States, where we have so much racial diversity here. That's definitely a great tool for people who mean to stir shit up. They definitely want to use the racial aspect because we're ripe for it. We have a lot of, we're made up of a lot of different races. So all you got to do is stick that stick in there and stir it up and watch it grow. So
I feel that, for a lot of people, and I've, being a white guy, I don't know.
I didn't know. White.
No, I'm white. I'm very Canadian. I don't even tan. I don't even tan. I don't even tan. But
yeah.
But what I'm trying to get at here is I don't know the racial implications that First Nations have gone through, what black people or Chinese people or East Indian people have gone through. I'll never know that. The only thing that I can do is change myself to make sure that I realize that, you cut my arm open, you cut a black person's arm open, and guess what? The blood is the same color. And he could be O positive, I could be O positive, so really we're a match. And I guess I look at it, I was never brought up on this whole racist crap that is out there. And for someone to be, for people today to throw around that term, whether it's racist, whether now, thank you to Gerald Butts, Justin Trudeau's right-hand henchman, Nazi, using the word Nazi, is that what people now are subjugated to for having differing opinions? Because that's taking political correctness to an absolute new level when you have to be accusatory of someone's belief because they ask a question.
Right. Well, like I said earlier, I'm of the mind that I don't think that we truly have but a fraction of things like true racism, true sexism, and this friction that we supposedly have in our world. You're never as a species, as a human species, you're never going to eradicate 100% of racism. No matter how much you try, you just won't, because it's an inherent flaw in humanity. It's just the way it is, okay? All the ugly parts of humanity will always be there to some degree. But in reality, I think that we've made really huge strides over the years of moving away from real organic instances of racism. Again, you're always going to find the worst cases here and there, and there's always going to be those things. But as a society, as a whole, I really feel like we had reached a point where we were beginning to really understand these issues on our own. And I think that now what I see is blatant manipulation to stir things back up and to generate friction to a much larger degree than what really may exist in our culture. And again, earlier as I outlined the process of which I believe that's done, from an engineered, it starts from an engineered perspective, and then obviously then an organic process begins to seed. You see what I'm saying? So in a way, then it does kind of become real because you're putting people against each other, right? I guess if
what
I was
about
to
Jamie,
describe,
go ahead.
If I was to describe an analogy of it, I would say, let's say you have one group of people on one side of the mountain and another group of people on the other side of the mountain. And then you had an instigator that went over to Group A and said, "Hey, Group B is gonna attack you guys in about 20 minutes, and they're gonna come over here and they're gonna try to kill you." And they're like, oh my God, yeah, you better prepare. You better prepare because they don't like you. And then the instigator moseys over to Group B and tells them the same thing about Group A. In 20 minutes, you're going to have a battle on your hands when really they really didn't have much of a problem with each other to begin with. But they were instigated into it by false information. And I know I'm oversimplifying things with that analogy, but basically that's the formula that I see being engineered, and it's unfortunate. So the political correct stuff, what you're suggesting, where you can't just say things and this and that, that's a back end way. That's an alternative way to pit us against each other, because what you're doing is you're saying, well, you can't say that. If you say that, you're a Nazi or you're a racist. You can't say that. You can't use that term. And you see it in just everything. The immigration bill, for example, that President Trump here in the U.S. Is working on. When he was speaking about it, he used the term chain migration, right? And Trump didn't invent the term chain migration. Basically, chain migration is that if one person illegally immigrates to the U.S. or anywhere, and they bring their whole family with them, that would be considered chain migration, because they're coming in a secession. See what I'm saying? So in other words, one person legally gets citizenship, but now he can legally bring in these other people that are with him because they're part of his family. That's the implication, right? But the phrase is chain migration. It's appropriate. It's an appropriate term to use for it. It just means what it means. But Senator Dick Durbin proposed that the other day in some public address he was making that, we can't use the term chain migration because it hurts black people or African Americans' feelings because they were brought over here as slaves in chains. Knowing full well when he said that's not the context of which the word chain is being used. But the irony here is, Dave, and the funny part, and the reason I use this as an example is, I guess Dick Durbin forgot then when he was trying to sell the DREAM Act to Congress in 2010, and he pitched it on the floor, that he used the term chain migration to help sell the bill. And that was long before Trump came along. So this is the kind of hypocrisy and doublespeak and political punting and maneuvering and manipulation that's going on. So the term chain migration really isn't offending anyone. They're making it up to attack the other political party and to stir up friction, because he used the term himself 10 years ago when he was selling the Dream Bill. So, these politically correct things that we fight over and stuff, we're all being manipulated. And if we're not careful, we're going to lose a lot by being manipulated in that way. We need to start rising above all this stuff and realize that we're actually being manipulated into so many of these debates and so many of these petty arguments. We need to be stronger and more cohesive and rise above this kind of stuff. And we need to call it out, just like you are with Trudeau. When you see that kind of stuff, man, fight it with everything you got, just like you are. I'm glad to see you doing what you're doing with that in Canada, because I try to do the same thing here in the U.S. and a lot of people do. And yeah, we get called names, we get called bigots and racist and all sorts of things, Nazis. It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's all they've got. That's their go-to, and it's not accurate. It's unfortunate, but whatever. You're going to take it on the chin. But you can't relent. You can't give in, because if you do, and you have thin skin, you're going to lose the battle, and ultimately the globalists are going to win. So,
turning the attention to Mr. Trudeau once again, I'm going to play another clip for you here. This is from a gentleman who was pretty badly injured in the Canadian Army over in Afghanistan when the vehicle he was in hit an IED. So this clip, it's a little long, but you have to listen to it all to fully understand the implications of what was said. This is, everything they say happens in threes. This is number 3 that has everyone in Canada irate.
Okay.
Canadian Line Infantry out of here in Edmonton, 1st Battalion. I served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 7 years. I deployed in Afghanistan back in 2009 until April 3rd, where I was obviously severely wounded by a roadside bomb or improvised explosive. As you can see, I've lost my left leg. I have 58% soft tissue loss and 88% nerve damage on my right leg. Back in August 24th, 2015, you made the promise, and I'll quote it here, "No veteran will be forced to fight their own government for the support and compensation they have earned." Yet you are still currently in a legal battle with veterans regarding equal support and compensation to their peers. As you can tell, we have two standard of veterans who fought in the same war. The ones prior to 2006 and the ones after 2006. There are 2 standards. One on the old Pension Act and one under this new lump sum or soon-to-be lifetime pension option. Which, by the way, Mr. Prime Minister, by what you just said here, through my own determination, I'm still at work. So technically, by what you said just a little while ago, I don't qualify for it. Sorry. So my question is...
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your courage.
So my question is to you, Mr. Prime Minister, what veterans were you talking about? Because you have ISIL or ISIS members coming into a reintegration program. You did a backdoor deal with Omar Khadr with not even stepping into the courtroom. So again, my question is, what veterans were you talking about? Was it the ones that fought for the freedoms and values that you so proudly boast about, or was it the ones who fought against? Because honestly, Mr. Prime Minister, I was prepared to be injured in the line of duty when I joined the military. Nobody forced me to join the military. I was prepared to be killed in action. What I wasn't prepared for, Mr. Prime Minister, is Canada turning its back on me. So which veteran was it that you were talking about?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your passion and your strength and being here today to share this justifiable frustration and anger with me and with all of us here. Thank you for having the courage to stand here, and thank you for listening to my answer. On a couple of elements you brought up. First of all, why are we still fighting against certain veterans groups in court? Because they are asking for more than we are able to give right now. They are asking for more than we... Well, no. Hang on. You're asking for honest answers.
And there it is.
Yeah. Well, that's a blatant... I applaud the veteran there for having the courage and the opportunity to stand up and tell it like it is. I mean, it's a straight sellout is what it sounds like. And he's right. and we experience that stuff here too, where our veterans aren't taken care of, but illegal immigrants are taken better care of than our veterans. We give more foreign aid to countries that are our enemies than we do to our own veterans. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, again, that governments do when they're operating for a different agenda than they are for their own citizens. And we have to hold their feet to the fire, and we have to call them out on it. And, Trudeau seems to me to be the epitome of a globalist. He doesn't seem like he really cares about Canada, if you want my honest opinion. He doesn't seem to care about Canada. I don't believe Obama cared about America. The things that he said seem like he didn't care. His policies seem like he didn't care. We've had a lot of presidents like that. And they come from both political parties, to be perfectly honest with you. They just don't seem like they care about their country. They really seem like they're serving another agenda that has really nothing to do with serving their own citizens. And unfortunately, I think that's what I'm seeing for you guys in Trudeau.
Well, and I want to bring up and add up another part of that. Okay, and what happened there was when this gentleman stood up to the Prime Minister of Canada, he literally said, which veterans are you helping out here? This comes on the heels of a few months ago, once again, without going to debate in the House of Commons or allowing the Canadian court system to hear the case, Trudeau's government gave terrorist Omar Khadr $10.5 million and had to issue a public apology for the way he was treated at Guantanamo Bay after he was arrested for killing an American soldier over in Afghanistan. He was taken prisoner of war and shipped over to Guantanamo Bay. Under that deal, we have now learned it was worked that soldier's family cannot sue Khadr for that amount. This would have never, ever came to fruition if Trudeau and his government had not thrown out a law that was brought in by the previous Conservative government that if you are a Canadian citizen and you go serve for a terrorist organization, you are not welcome back here. Your citizenship has been revoked. But Trudeau, when he stepped into office, that was one of the first laws he changed back. Was he said everybody has a right to be a Canadian citizen, even if they go to fight our own countrymen in a different land. Wow. And then, on top of that, he now believes, even though studies have proved it, that the Canadian people in Canadian government areas have done this study, where Trudeau has this idea that he wants to spend, I believe the number is $35 million, on rehabilitating people coming back from Afghanistan who fought for ISIS or ISIL. And statistics show that they are not rehabilitable.
Right.
So you can see the mounting frustration on many Canadians' faces when this isn't helping. This isn't helping our veterans. This isn't helping our tax situation. It isn't anything else. And like Ron says, fighting for another country isn't treason in Canada. Should be if you're fighting Canadian soldiers or allied soldiers.
Well, from where I sit and from, if we're using the American values, you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. I mean, how can you consider someone welcome in your country if your idea is to keep your country sovereign and keep your country safe? How can you welcome them with open arms when they blatantly fought against you? That's treasonous by its very definition. But, to be honest with you, I think it even goes beyond that. I don't think it's just a matter of liberal feel-good politics and policy. I think there's a possibility of that lending itself to what I consider the bigger picture here, which goes back to something that we were talking about right before the break about the influx of immigrants. Whenever you look at something like that, and you can look at those two things, the influx of the immigrants, right? The Middle Eastern immigrants that came in when, as we described earlier, they would have been better facilitated somewhere else with the same amount or better resources closer to them that was more suitable to their own culture. So you got to consider, well, is there a bigger agenda here at play? Is there another reason why they chose other countries besides those Middle Eastern countries? And then when you talk about, the people who went and, the Canadians that went and served for ISIS and then are now being welcomed back into culture, do you suppose that it's worth entertaining the idea that they're trying to integrate almost a forced or engineered integration of more Muslims into your culture? Let me be clear. Earlier, your preface to speaking on the immigrants, your preface was, your calculated thought in that was, well, yeah, we've got the resources. We're a charitable nation. Sure, bring them here if they need to come here. You weren't racist. You didn't say no, they're not welcome. But in your critical thinking and researching the whole the overview of the situation, it seems like a natural conclusion, a natural question to ask. Well, why didn't these other countries that seem like their own culture, why wouldn't they take them when they have the same resources, right? So you were only applying critical thinking to the process. And so if you do the same thing with the soldiers who went and fought against your country and the traitors, you put those two things together and they may paint a picture that's the same picture. You see what I'm saying? Now, why does that matter? Because it's just a hypothesis, right? But why does it work better for me as an explanation than each topic standing on its own merit? Because if you consider both of those things and others, right, relative to that together, it fits nicely into the global agenda. In other words, they're trying to water down your traditional culture. They're trying to bring in other influences to wear down your traditional culture. And it starts with changing languages and changing policy without asking you and changing the anthem and these forced things. You see, what's happening is in Canada, and what you're beginning to see is what we've been seeing in our country all along, is that the undercurrent to all of this is a forced change in our traditional culture. It's not an organic change. It's a forced engineered change. And they're doing that in a lot of different ways. I mean, you have to consider these things are brilliantly calculated. They're brilliantly engineered. It's not some incidental thing or some Yahoo doing it. There are people hard at work, unfortunately, brilliant minds working for a global agenda. And so, and they've made a lot of progress and they've affected a lot of cultures. And I believe that's what's really going on here. I think that's what's happening in the PC culture. I think that's what's happening with a lot of this forced immigration and a lot of these so-called refugees and things that are going on. I think there's a whole lot of engineering going on in the world right now that is meant to serve a global agenda and to whittle away at individual countries' sovereignty. You want to whittle down each country's own ability to function and strive as they have traditionally and make them more pliable to a global government.
Jamie, I have a question from Gail here on Periscope.tv, watching us live. Hi, Gail. Gail's question.
Hi, Gail.
Gail's question is, JB, what would the point be in that planned integration then?
What would be what? What was the question again?
What would be the point in bringing in planned integration? Like, why would they want to do this?
Well, because, what happens is that to weaken a culture, you have to weaken their tradition. You have to weaken their structural elements, the things that are perceived to be their culture, their religion. You weaken their religion. You weaken their infrastructure. You weaken their language. You weaken them in any way that you can. And so when you bring in mass refugees or mass immigrants, what happens is that your traditions will be affected by that. And they further engineer that process by making the traditional ways, the traditional languages and things seem racist. You see what I mean? Now, the problem the United States has is that we did go through, the period of slavery and then post-slavery civil rights movements and things. So as a nation, we do have a history, a messy history. And so that racism sells really big over here. The global agenda engineers can use that a lot more effectively over here. But the big picture idea is they don't really want us to get along. They want us to fight. You see what I'm saying? They want traditional structure to be weakened. So that's how, most Canadians, I'm sure, would have viewed the influx of refugees as a charitable thing to do, the right thing to do, right? I mean, anybody in their right mind, if it's proposed to you, hey, listen, these people are desperate and they need a place to go, your first thought isn't going to be, no, turn them away. We don't want to lose our culture. You wouldn't think, nobody would think that way. That's not your initial thought. Your initial thought is, of course, bring them here. We have the resources. But, a natural thinking process for someone who is capable of critical thinking and looking at things in big picture ways, and eventually you're going to get around to asking the questions like you asked. Like, well, okay, it's fine that they come here. That's great. But why did they come here when, when other Muslim nations were closer and more readily available and had at least as many resources, if not more, than we did? So it was a fair question. You see what I'm saying? So when you start to examine these things from a different perspective, not just your goodwill, perspective, which is fine and fair, but you're not allowed to look at them or ask questions from any other perspective. Because once you start doing that, then you're no longer viewed as a charitable person. You don't have an open heart. You don't have an open mind. Now you're a racist and a Nazi just because you asked the question. Yet, if you look at this thing, it's happening in your country. It's happening here. It's happening in Switzerland. It's happening in the UK. There seems to be a huge influx of immigrants, especially Muslim immigrants and refugees, all over the world right now into Western culture. And I believe that a large portion of that, maybe not even from the refugees themselves, okay, but from the engineers who are forcing this policy and these changes, I believe there's probably an ingredient in there of globalization. I think that's, to me, that's self-evident. And I think that's why we're seeing the friction that we are. And that's why these things are coming to a head. And that's why these questions are being raised. So basically, in a nutshell, I think what the agenda is a globalist society, and that's what the engineers want. They want a global world. They want a globalist society, and they're trying to force it on us differently than they did in World War II. They knew that doing it by blunt force in war is very difficult to do. So they've been socially engineering now for decades. They approached it a different way. They decided instead of just by war forcing social engineering and globalization, we're going to do it through subtle policy and time, and we're going to baby step towards this. And if you follow the footsteps back decade after decade, you will see that there's evidence to suggest that that's what's been going on. Policy after policy after policy, social change after social change after social change. And it's becoming more and more that these social changes and these policies aren't even part of a democratic process, as you suggest, with the changing of the anthem and some other things. And it's just kind of being imposed upon the people. And because we're reaching that tipping point now where the people are going to lose enough power and enough sovereignty and enough democracy among themselves, at some point we're going to reach that tipping point, and we won't have a chance to win this battle anymore. The globalists will have achieved what they want.
Eric with a K is wondering if this is all about the process of creating a stronger and more widening globalization of the New World Order.
That's exactly what it is. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You can call it New World Order, you can call it globalization, whatever you want to call it. But yes, that's exactly what all of this feeds into. The PC culture, all this friction, changing of traditional culture, all of it. And it happens in bits and pieces, and it's micromanaged in such a way that it's cloaked because, see, they have us fighting over things in small pieces and small chunks, right? And so we're busy fighting over the cheese, and we don't see the rat. We don't see this. We don't see it because we're emotionally affected by these little pieces of the puzzle in our day-to-day routine. We get little pieces of news, and we get caught up in one bias or another bias, and we assume our political positions, and we face the opposition, and we fight these petty little battles, and we never really stop to consider that we're really all being manipulated. We're being manipulated. And it's not that some of these things we wouldn't naturally have organic differences over anyway. We may, right? We all have differences, but they wouldn't be stirred up to such a degree that it almost feels like there's a pending civil war on the horizon every day. And a lot of times it feels that way. It's not necessarily so, but we start to feel that way. Like there's going to be some big revolution or some, civil war or some major uprising or things are so bad between us. And that's because we're being manipulated to think that way and to feel that way and to respond that way. And we really need to start thinking about these things in a different light. I believe if we're going to make it, we need to protect our traditions, protect our sovereignty. I mean, there's always room for any culture to improve, but it should be up to that culture to make its changes and its improvements or whatever organically on its own. It shouldn't be forced upon us by a foreign government, a foreign entity, a global government, or even by our own governments. In the United States, we believe that the people are bigger than the government, and that's something we stand on. And when it feels the other way around, when it feels like the government is bigger than the people, then we've got a real problem. But we don't just feel that way about ourselves. We feel everybody should have those freedoms. We feel like our neighbors to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, everybody should live in a society free to make up their own traditions, their own history, celebrate their own traditions. You can appreciate everyone else's, but you're free to celebrate your own. But we're being homogenized. We're being into forced homogenization here, and it's forced cultural and social engineering, and we're seeing a lot of the clashes and the byproducts of that, and that it ultimately, it won't be pretty. Even if the globalists end up getting their way, it won't come without a lot of bloodshed and a lot of cost. It's not going to happen easily, even if they get their way. But I think before we get to that point, we still have, as individual sovereign nations, a chance to wake up and realize that we're all being manipulated to that end. And if we take that power back and take our own cultures back, without bloodshed, in other words, do it in a civil way, just realize that we're bigger than the government, we have a chance. But if the government and the media and the globalists dictate and manipulate us, we're not going to win, because they're very, very effective at what they do. They've been working on this for a very long time.
Where is this power structure from? Is it a Zionist-type state? Is it the Mossad? Is it the Rothschilds or the Bilderbergers? Who could it be?
There are a lot of power groups out there. There are a lot of the names that you just mentioned do factor into the globalist movement. But you have to remember, these groups, as you mentioned, Bilderberger for one, the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, is a huge one, especially here in the West. Yes, they are part of that movement. They are part of the engineering structure of that movement. But what you have to remember is that all of those bodies of those institutions who do serve that agenda are made up of individual human beings. So those individuals realize that it's probably not going to be fully realized in their own lifetime. They are serving this agenda as if it were a religion to them, as if it were their life's work. And they realize that it's been going on for generations now, before they were involved in it, and it's going to continue after they're involved in it. So it's nothing that they propose is going to happen overnight. And they use all instruments of government, all institutions. They use academia, they use our government, they use our media, they use our entertainment industry. And what happens is that they indoctrinate. So each generation that comes along of young people, young Canadians, young Americans, young Muslims, they're all being indoctrinated to this one end, generation after generation. So when you're born into that change, as it's changing, you don't even know the difference. You don't even realize the difference because you've never seen the difference. It's like being born in a time where there's cell phones. You can't really imagine a time when there weren't. But that translates into social things as well. So all instruments of government and banking and political arena and media and all of that, in any facet of human life, they have gotten their tentacles into to affect those institutions and those bodies to serve their purpose. But yes, some of those names that you mentioned, the Bilderbergers, the CFR, Trilateral Commission, so many of them are actual instruments, the UN, and the funny thing is that these institutions operate under false flags. In other words, they propose to be goodwill agencies, like the UN. You say, well, the UN does good things in the world. Well, do they? I mean, do they? Why do we really need a UN? Why? Let me put it more accurately. Why do we need a UN peacekeeping force? Why that in itself, if you think about it, is a global army. They're not built up to that point yet. But just the idea of one is a little scary to me. A UN, United Nations Army? I don't think we need that. That very idea is scary to me. But these institutions, they all operate under the idea that they're doing goodwill and good work in the world, when really what they're really doing behind the scenes is shady business towards a global agenda. And even when you say global agenda, when you use that term, I think a lot of people, since a lot of people really may not even know what that means or what does that represent? What is global? What do the globalists really want? Well, some may sell that idea as another wonderful idea, and on paper it may look like a wonderful idea. They could sell it. They could sell it in such a way to make it sound like the whole world gets along and we're all one, and we don't need to be different, and we don't need to speak different languages, and we don't need different money systems, and we don't need different religions. We only need one. Let's all come together as one human race. That's a really nice idea on paper, but it is not the nature of mankind to live that way, and we don't need to do that to live harmonious together in the world. First of all, I don't believe that it's realistically achievable in any lifetime, but it's definitely not achievable anytime in our lifetime, our children's lifetime, grandchildren, or for generations and generations to come. And I just don't think that's the direction. I think that even moving towards that, we're being led into a trap, because I don't think the globalists are necessarily really interested in goodwill and the entire world coming together to sing Kumbaya. I don't think that's the objective of the globalist idea. I think the objective of the globalist idea is that you have a very, very small group of rulers, and the entire rest of the world serves those very small amount of rulers. So that what they want to do, really, in essence, is centralize their power and make everybody else subservient to that. And I don't think that's a good idea.
We only have about 4.5 minutes here before we got to go to our final break of the night. I think Joe in the chat room nails this one on the head. He says, Jamie, everyone wants world peace, but Coke and Pepsi can't even exist in the same restaurant together.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I get offended when they don't have Coke. I'm not a Pepsi drinker. So.
See, that's why you and I will always butt heads. I'm a Pepsi guy. You're a Coca-Cola guy.
Yeah.
It's head straight for the octagon.
That's cool. I mean, we can duke it out. But, the thing is, if I run out of Coke, I'm sure you're going to offer me a Pepsi. And, if you run out of Pepsi, I'll offer you a Coke. That's the way we get along.
I'd take that. I'd take that.
The cool thing is that we can have both, right? And we can have both. I think that I forget the caller's name or the guest name that posed that, but he's right. World peace is a nice idea, and I'm not against that. I mean, that would be nice. I think we should all work towards that. But I don't think that nations giving up their own culture and their own sovereignty is necessary to achieve world peace. I think that's a trap, is what that is. So I don't think we achieve it that way. I think that's really a trap.
I want to get to.
So I try to.
Go ahead.
Try to avoid that.
I want to get to a quick comment here from Andrew on Twitter. And he brings up a good historic point about Justin Trudeau. He says, Justin Trudeau's mother was a Sinclair, one of the super elite families with connections going back to the Knights Templar. The Sinclairs built Roslyn Chapel, and they are suspected of knowing about North America long before Columbus arrived. Justin's good friend, the Aga Khan, is head of the Ismailis. The original Ismailis were the assassins, who had secret connections with the assassins during the Crusades, the Knights Templar, who is rumored to have gained much esoteric knowledge from the assassins themselves. Little history lesson there. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Kind of cool. We got about 90 seconds here before we got to go to break. In hour number 3, I want to let everybody know that we're going to open up the phone lines to you. Do you have questions about globalism? Do you have questions about the Mossad? Do you have questions about the moves Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has made recently? You can call in at 1-702-302-4556. That's 1-702-302-4556. Because we're going to take your calls on everything. And you know, Jamie will even give you some, you know, post-Valentine's love advice if you need. That's just the kind of guy he is. He's giving that way.
You got it.
Oh, I know how you roll.
Oh,
You're a modern day. You're a modern day Cupid, my friend. A modern day Cupid.
I've heard those rumors. Don't believe any of that.
I hung out with Jamie once. I hung out with Jamie once in Las Vegas, and I couldn't believe that when he took off his jacket, there were a pair of wings and a bow and arrow hanging off of them. It was absolutely incredible to see. Absolutely incredible to see.
That wasn't a bow.
Oh. Anyhow, oh my goodness. We're going to go to a break here right now on Spaced Out Radio. Jamie Sexton is our guest with the Rebel Planet News. Jamie comes in the third Thursday of every month with the Rebel Planet, where we talk all things alternative, all things in the media, the storylines in between the storylines, and we bring it to you here first. It's the only time of the month we actually go into the media, the alternative side, to see where things are going on. Once again, 1-702-302-4556 if you want to call in tonight in hour number 3. We'll be right back with the third hour of Jamie Sexton and the Thought of the Dave.
Hello, SOR listeners. Lorian Fenton here. Let me ask you, now that disclosure's happened, what does it mean for ufology? For answers, join us at UFOCon 2018 in South San Francisco, California, March 23rd through 25th. Keynote speakers Stephen Bassett, Grant Cameron, and Melinda Leslie address the current disclosure agenda. Dave Scott, yes, you're Dave Scott, and Lynn Buchanan tell of amazing alien encounters. Get your tickets at caufocon.com. That's caufocon.com.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
We're lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, we are opening up the lines to you. It's a free-for-all Friday night, as I want to hear your opinions on absolutely everything. We'll open them up right off the bat during the show. You want to talk UFOs, you want to talk Justin Trudeau, you want to talk globalism, you want to talk paranormal experiences. I want to hear about it tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time, at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on the Fringe FM, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to revolution.radio and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Tesseradicades. Tesseradicades is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can watch us live on periscope.tv. You can also follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. We are on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, where you can read up on the encounter online, dealing with all the paranormal news of the day. Watch some Bumblefoot videos. You can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, and watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. For the final time tonight, we bring back Jamie Sexton from the Rebel Planet News. The Rebel Planet takes place the third Thursday of every month right here on Spaced Out Radio, and we've been talking about globalism. We've been talking about political correctness all night long. Jamie, welcome back.
Good to be back. Thank you.
I also want to remind people that we are opening up the phone lines right now. 1-702-302-4556. That's 1-702-302-4556. If you want to talk about anything that we have discussed with Jamie tonight, give us your opinion. What do you feel? Do you think we're being pushed into some globalist agenda? There's a lot of people out there talking about it. I know. I'm reading the comments in the chat rooms. Call on in. Tell us your opinion. Keep it straight. None of this racist or Nazism crap that apparently opinions cannot hold. We don't want that. But a good, solid conversation is what we're looking for. Jamie, good to have you back, man. Your next appearance on this show will be Thursday, March 15th. So we're glad to have you here once a month, and I hope you have your Cupid wings put away for another year.
Oh, absolutely. I may be ironically coming to you from Vegas. Then I may jump out there for a visit at that time and do the show from there. But we'll see. Either way, I'll be here for you.
That would be nice. That would be nice. Vegas is a nice place to visit. A nice place to visit. And every time... Who says you can't go back home again? But either way, like we were talking during the break, I do got to get you up here one fall to go salmon fishing. Definitely have to do that.
Yeah, when do you go exactly?
The season heats up around September 15th and goes until the heavy rains in November.
Very good.
Now the big ones, when they come in, if you want to fish for the big ones, the big you Americans call them king salmon. We call them springs. We call them spring salmon. They start running around the end of September, and, I got to beat my record. My record out of there is 47 pounds.
Wow. 47 pounds. Okay. Yeah,
40,
I'm definitely coming up.
47 pounds on 20-pound test line. It was a beautiful fight.
Yeah, I might even talk my brother and nephew into coming up, too. They love to fish. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm
Absolutely.
into it.
I also want to remind our listeners that normally after the show recently, we've been doing some musical interludes for a couple of hours after the show on Periscope. I will not be able to do that tonight. I do apologize, because you know how I like to rock out with you. And we all know Gail doesn't go to bed until she hears her Rob Zombie effing in a UFO. We all know that. But the main thing is I have to, and I'll tell you why, it's actually kind of cool and eerie at the same time. I'm actually heading out on a paranormal investigation right after the show. Mrs. SOR's good friend from work, her husband, for the last 3 months has been waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he has been pinned down by some entity holding him down. So I'm actually going there to check things out to see if I can clear that out of there. I will let you know tomorrow night if I'm successful or anything like that. So I am going to have to get out of here right after the show, because Paranormal Dave has to put his paranormal hat on and go play with some ghosts or whatever the hell it is. Could be aliens. I don't know. I'm thinking ghosts, but you know me. I try and get aliens into every show. So that is what... No, it's not really. You had to be the guy. You had to be the guy tonight.
Sorry.
Now everybody's going to start hammering me on the damn gnomes now. Son of a gun.
Man.
Son of a gun. Don't really buy it.
What if you get over there and it's a gnome situation?
I'm fighting it.
I'm just preparing you.
I'm fighting.
Okay.
I'm going to stretch. I'm going to put, I'm going to put my hockey gloves on just so I can drop them, because that's the only way I know how to fight. And then I'm going to, drop the gloves, and this gnome and I are going to get it on. And I may come back battered and bruised, but I'm going to be, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. Gail is asking, Dave, what do you do if you find a ghost? I'm going to tell it to go away. That's what I normally do. Tell it to go away. All right.
I thought it'd be more interesting to make friends with the ghosts.
Sometimes. But if it's getting a little malevolent and, pinning people down, that's not a good sign. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's not a good... You want to calm that down, for sure. Yeah.
So, going to head on over there right after the show, and, hopefully...
Be safe.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And you be safe, too, because I know that, you're desperately going to be, doing your thing after the show, and whatever that is, probably doing a little bit of writing, reading a little scripture. That's just the way it goes for you on a Thursday night.
Exactly. That's,
That's
what I'll be doing.
All right. Les says, Dave, how about we pick the topic and you have to talk about it for 2 minutes without repeating, okay? Fire away, Les. I'm up for your challenge. Fire away. Michelle says on Twitter, because Michelle got in late, she had to work. And she says, I stayed behind at work tonight to push paperwork through, and now I don't know anything that's going on, but Dave is staring at Buddy's body saying he's Cupid. I'm not staring at his body. I can't even see the dude. Can't even...
That's great. You walked into that one, buddy.
I did. I totally walked in. Thanks, Michelle. That's what happens when you're 4 hours away. Not just on Eastern time, but on Maritime time. 4 hours. 4 hours.
Where's Michelle coming from?
I believe she is from New Brunswick.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, she is way over there. way over there.
Okay.
And she is, between her and Les on Twitter right now, being pounded by gnome pictures, and I don't like it. I don't like it. It's very cruel.
Did I start something? I apologize.
Normally. All right, we got a call coming in here.
All right.
And this call is coming in from Ontario.
Like it.
I'm going to get you to turn your sound down if you don't mind there, Static.
Did I start something?
Oh, shoot. I know.
Normally. All right, we got a call coming in here.
Hang on a second, Dave. Sorry.
All right.
This call is coming in from Ontario.
God damn it.
I'm going to get you to turn your sound down if you don't mind there, Static.
Yep, I'm working on it. I know.
All right.
How long until he swears? That's what I want to know. That's
There we
what I
go.
want.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, hey, how
Okay,
you doing?
Sorry about that.
How you doing, Mr. Static?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Now, Jamie, I'm gonna let you know because you're a 905, and I recognize phone numbers very quickly.
Oh, is that
But I want to have you and Jamie do a rock and roll sing off tonight.
Sing off. Okay.
That's what I want. That's what I want.
What? I'm sorry, is Jamie a singer as well?
Yes. Pretty damn good singer.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I want to go up against a good singer.
We might both feel bad about ourselves. And you might lose some listeners, that we don't want to do that.
I probably will. You never know. So, the reason I'm calling, actually, is fantastic show tonight, by the way, guys. Just incredible.
Thank you.
But
thank you. I'm
curious. See, I deal with the paranormal a little bit here and there. Well, actually a lot. But when you're referring to things coming down to a head, and there's quite a lot of how do I explain it? There's quite a lot of things from the left and from the right. Their heads are colliding, and it's not quite as bad as you think. As you say. I don't believe.
Right.
I don't believe that there's so many okay, it's like this. I think it's a lot more paranormal than you can imagine. Now, you may think I'm a little nuts here or something, but I'm not. Good and evil has been fighting for quite some time, as everybody knows, I'm sure. And now what's about to happen, and already has basically been the start of it, is there is going to be quite the battle. No question about it. But it's not like everybody thinks, like there's the end of the world and whatnot. But with being politically correct constantly, too many people worrying about it, all it's doing is putting this big pressure, this big huge weight on everybody, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that I think I know what you're implying. If I interpret it correctly, maybe you're suggesting that what we're experiencing isn't as bad as it seems, but it is causing an overwhelming stress on everyone, even though it's not really as bad as it seems, but it feels bad. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, it is.
Well, no, that was my question. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I missed that. Sorry. Say that again. My phone's messing up on me.
Oh, if I understand you correctly, or do you mean to suggest that, because you said at one point it's not as bad as we think, but
no, I think
it seems.
Yeah, I think if people actually sit back and take it a little bit easier. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I've been singing all night too. If people sit back, it'll actually erase a bit of this cloud that's putting down pretty well over the whole world. And that's inviting a lot of bad entities and good entities to really battle it out. And it's only going to give us ulcer pains and worries and everything else. So instead of the constant, he said this, she said that, and whatnot, it would be wonderful to hear that stop. Like all the, being politically correct constantly and whatnot. Like you always tell me, Dave, like horns up, is it?
Oh, you got to have the horns up. I think what you're trying to get to here is, I think it's a real Canadian analogy here, is we always tend to think that things aren't as bad as they are until they actually get to that point. And what Jamie is trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, but I think what you're trying to say is, it is getting to that point where we do have to start caring.
We better.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
no,
right.
Right. I mean, you may be considering all these things from a different perspective, maybe a philosophical or a spiritual or otherwise, and which is fine if that's your perspective. But I do agree that with Dave's comment, from my perspective, I think that we become apathetic. And we get used to a certain degree of caving and a certain degree of saying, well, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. But you have to remember that's the same thing that happens to people in abusive relationships. They make excuses and then they convince themselves that it's not that bad. But if an outsider were to look in, they would go, gosh, you shouldn't be living this way. You're giving up your freedoms and you're being abused and manipulated, and you need to get out of that. But the person in it, because they've dealt with it for so long with an accepting and apathetic attitude, they don't see it. They don't even realize it. And to a degree, I think that might be the mindset that I think a lot of people are getting into. We don't see the changes. We don't see the manipulation. We see some of it, but we don't see the big picture of it. And so that's my take on it.
Well, and nothing wrong with your take, by the way. The only thing I'm saying is I'm not coming from I'm coming from a very spiritual sort of area, and
right.
It's more it's an actual seeing and knowing. Like I've experienced this for many years, and I've seen for many years, and if we're not in an abusive relationship, we're really not. By the time that, we're here for a very short time, as you know, when we do finally get to our destination, we're all going to be connected as one anyways. It's going to be a completely different, it's going to be something different than you couldn't really grasp. Like, it's hard to grasp your head around it right now. But when it does happen, and when things like that do come down, it's not going to be, as long as we don't let it, happen. Like, as long as we don't let it get too bad. And the way that we will let it get too bad is by talking about it too much.
Right.
That's just my belief.
Static, thank you so much, buddy. Appreciate you calling in. And get that throat better, man. We got to have this sing-off between you and Jamie.
Yeah, I've just been singing all day and all night, too. But, it should be better shortly. Don't worry.
All right.
We'll do that.
Okay,
Good talking to you.
Later.
Take care.
He wears a good headband too, just so you know, or bandana. He wears a good bandana too.
When I'm allowed.
No, Static there, he actually wears a red bandana. You're the black bandana guy. He's a red bandana kind of guy.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely the black. Everything I wear is black.
What do you think of that point where he says maybe it isn't as bad as what we seem? Is that just without, putting down Static on his point, is that just too much of the attitude that a lot of people have right now is like they're willing to take a little bit and a little bit. It's like a mouse. They always nibble the cheese. They don't go for the big piece right off the bat.
Well, I mean, I think it's a complex issue, and sometimes perspective has a lot to do with these types of things. For example, if I follow his line of reasoning that we shouldn't talk about it, well, I don't think I would agree with that categorically. I don't think that, but I think that talking about it the way that we tend to talk about it, which is from an emotional standpoint, is unhealthy, because you really don't get anything done when you let your emotions guide your interactions with people. So I don't necessarily think it's the exchange of ideas and the conversation about it that's harmful. I think that if we keep shouting at each other from a static position, back and forth, I think that's not healthy. But it also feeds into the agenda, because that's what they want. They want us at each other's throats. They don't want us to calmly, quietly, in a healthy way, work things out cohesively and work out our differences, or even live with our differences. As far as in terms of what the caller was suggesting, as far as, when we finally get to a place, that sounds to me like, an afterlife idea or a philosophical idea or spiritual idea. And I think, a lot of people hold those ideas and they're wonderful. But I for one am not comfortable with the idea of letting my time here, even if there were an afterlife, just handing it over and being apathetic about it, because, I think this life counts. I think, as he said, well, our time here is short. It's relatively short, but it's a lifetime. And I think that not only do we have to consider preserving things that are important within our own lifetime, but if we really believe in those values and those things, we would probably want to preserve them for those that come after us in their lifetime. So I don't think we should ever be apathetic or just put things, let things simmer and wait for that wonderful afterlife where we're all, praising each other and everything's wonderful. Because, if that comes, that's great. But if it doesn't, and even if it does, I think our time here counts. And I, for one, don't want to live any portion of my life under the rule of the under a globalist thumb. I'm not comfortable with that idea, and I don't want my nephew to do that, and I don't want anyone after me to do that. So that's why we do the things that we do. I appreciate his basic sentiment about, not getting so wrapped up in the bickering and the fighting that we lose sight of what's important. I do agree with that. And I do agree with him that it's really not as bad as it seems to be. But it will get there. It will be a self-fulfilling prophecy if we're manipulated to that end. Because the powers that be want us to believe that we're at each other's throats. And if it keeps getting pushed, it's going to be a self-fulfilling thing, and it will be realized. That's what I want to avoid. So, in a certain sense, I agree with him that we do need to rise above the bickering. We need to start looking at things in a different way, not necessarily just an emotional reaction to things, and try to find our common ground again, and find peace before we get to that end place that he was suggesting. So that's where I'm at with it.
Gail has a question here. She is asking, who is the they behind all of this?
Well, that's the $1 million question, and there is not necessarily a they. In other words, it's not. You would be hard pressed to identify a particular panel of they, who they is, because my conclusion after years and years of studying this is that there's a whole lot of different theys. In other words, as I described earlier, you have different instruments of a global agenda. You have the political instruments, which is made up of individuals. You have the media instrument, which is made up of many entities and many individuals. And you have organizations and governing bodies, international governing bodies, and those are all made up of individual players. And so there's a lot of they, but a lot of the they, a lot of the people that and institutions that make up the they, some of those people who would fall under the heading of they don't even necessarily fully realize what they are serving. It's like having a company that's departmentalized, if you will. And, the accounting department may not necessarily know what everybody over in the maintenance department is doing, and the maintenance department may not necessarily know what everybody in the shipping and receiving department is doing, and so on. But they all know that they're serving one company to one end. You understand what I'm saying? So there's a whole lot of theys. I think some of the biggest decision makers in this would be some of the international bankers, because they have the most power to make things happen. He who prints the money is basically in charge. So it's some of the bigger international bankers and those institutions and the people at the top of those organizations. Those are the people with the most influence over the rest of the they. But there's thousands and thousands of people that make up the they, but a lot of them are fulfilling their role in that, sometimes unaware of a lot of the big picture. They get bits and pieces of it, but and they're doing their part for their own reasons. But there's a whole lot of they in they to answer that question.
1-702-302-4556 if you want to call in. 1-702-302-4556. Gail has a follow-up question. Jamie, do you believe gun control would end the killings we are seeing?
No, I do not. Not in the least. We've debated this before. I've written about it for years. It's it's a really complex issue, and of course we're dealing with it again right now. But to answer your question directly, no, I don't believe. I think the biggest problem when it comes to the idea of gun control in the United States is that guns in the United States are a different. They're a different bag of bones than they are in other parts of the world. So it's unique here. It's built into our Constitution and all sorts of things. So there's just and because we have so many gun owners in the United States, we have over 330 million registered guns in the United States, and that's just registered guns. So the gun issue and the gun control proposition, it looks good on paper to some people, but in reality, when you really study it and think it through, additional gun laws and gun control really will not solve any of this problem in the United States. And I've heard so many statistics. I've heard comparisons to models in other countries and things. And at the end of all of my study on this and other like-minded people, I just do not believe that it would make one bit of difference. And I just follow the fundamentals when it comes to that. And I follow the fundamentals as they apply to the United States, not to anywhere else. But, a lot of times when you consider any new gun law that someone would see, what happens is a lot of times, like this shooting that we had here yesterday, it's sad and it's tragic, and people, again, as I was describing earlier, like with most things, we react emotionally because we don't want that to happen. So we all panic and we react emotionally, and our natural instinct is we have to stop this. And everybody, I don't care what side of the political aisle or gun control aisle you are, everybody has that same reaction if you're a good person, obviously. Nobody on the left, nobody on the right, nobody pro-gun, nobody anti-gun, nobody wants to see these things happen. So nobody claims any moral high ground in any of this because it affects all of us and we all feel the same way. The only difference is a matter of how to prevent it. And again, from where I stand and all of my research for years and years and years, I do not believe that any additional gun laws would prevent any of this in our country. I think that we already have a whole lot of gun laws that are often ignored and overlooked, and there's errors and there's all kinds of things. So before we start talking about new gun laws, I think that we ought to start implementing the ones that are already on the books more effectively and see if they actually work. Because I don't want this to turn into a slippery slope in our nation where, well, that didn't work. Let's try a little more. Let's try a little more. Let's try a little more. And, that's the way you lose freedoms, is by giving a little bit at a time. And again, you take a tragedy or something that stirs up people's emotions, and that's when the people who mean to manipulate and take away your rights and liberties, that's when they will do it. They will do it in the middle of tragedy. And so I always say you have to weather these storms and let calmer heads prevail. And we can always have debates about it. We can always have discussions about it. But to be perfectly honest with you, the internet right now, especially in the U.S., is just on fire with this topic. Pro-gun versus anti-gun, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people are calling each other names and spewing facts and misinformation and this and that and the other thing and trying to put each other down. And they're having this big debate. It's a big emotional issue. And I get that. Again, it's a reaction. But we're not going, I haven't heard from the anti-gun side. I haven't seen one post, one fact, one statistic, anything in a reaction to this shooting or the last several, any new information or proposals that weren't considered 10, 15, 20 years ago. Nothing on the table is new. And throughout that time, we have in the United States instituted further gun laws. And again, they haven't proven to be effective with anything. So really, if gun control were a solution, if we were to follow that path of logic, in reality, if gun control were even possible in the United States, the only way it would be effective is for all guns to be illegal and confiscated. That's really the only way that it's going to be effective. Good luck trying to do that. It's not reality, and we, as Americans, historically, do not want that anyway. So I get the idea of it, but it doesn't translate well into reality. And I understand that everybody's heart is in the right place. I really do. And we all want the same thing. We don't want people to get shot or killed or by any means, by guns or bombs or trains or cars running over or poison or anthrax or anything. Nobody wants to see that. But instead of attacking the method and the means, we need to start living within the realm of reality. And that's where I come from with it. I come from the idea of guns are a reality in the United States. Yes, we can always because I had a lot of people online saying, well, you guys who are pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment, you're not even willing to examine other ideas. No, we are. Believe it or not, gun owners are intelligent people too, and we are able to examine the issue from all sides, and we have for decades. We're not blind. Not everybody is sitting around in the epitome of what I think some of the left sees this issue as is a bunch of rednecks sitting in their trailer holding onto their guns and scratching their guts and saying, we's going to keep our guns no matter what. That's naive thinking. That is not the stereotypical gun owner in this country. Gun owners come from all ilks of life, all levels of our society. And we're well spoken and we're well educated, and we have studied these issues, and we have considered many, many different avenues of possible potential gun laws. And most of us will conclude that we already have visited all of these ideas, and we've already relented and given up some of our freedoms with guns, and none of them have prevented these things from occurring ultimately. They still occur. It's unfortunate, and I wish we had a solution, but talking about being unwilling to listen to ideas, a lot of us have suggested, until we figure out some other things, why don't we go about the business of making sure that our children are safe in their schools? What's wrong with metal detectors? What's wrong with guards at schools? What's wrong with bulletproof glass? What's wrong with fences and things like that? And then I hear the argument of, well, we don't want our kids to be in prison. Well, it doesn't have to be a prison. I mean, everybody locks their door at night on their house. You don't want somebody coming into your home and harming your children. Most people in America have some form of security system, security cameras, security gates, walls and fences around they're willing to do that at their homes to protect what's theirs and their children, but they aren't open to the idea of doing it at school. Their first knee-jerk emotional reaction is to go for the guns. But if you are really serious about protecting soft targets and our children, what's wrong with the idea or exploring the idea of making sure that schools are safe? But they knock that idea out of hand immediately. Oh, what are you don't want your kids to be in prison? That's silly. We need to go after the guns. I say, no, you're starting at the wrong end of the horse. I say guns are a reality in our nation. These tragedies do occur. And until we figure out something to ultimately deal with people who would do harm to us, we do need to do a better job of protecting our children and other soft targets in our society. And if we're not going to get serious about that, then we're really not serious about it at all. So, you know, people are passionate about it on all sides. But to answer the question from your guest, no, I don't believe that any additional gun laws that I've heard recently would make a bit of difference in this issue whatsoever.
Changing topics, Michael wants to know, Jamie, what do you know about Agenda 21 and I think now Agenda 2040? Have you looked into those?
Yeah, Agenda 21 is part of the, it's part of the New World Order. It plays into it, It's basically about the United Nations. It's just a tentacle of the United Nations, but it plays into it basically plays into the New World Order. Agenda 21, as far as I know, basically is a part of doing away with boundaries and whittling away at our sovereignty. It's actually it was actually proposed. When it was proposed to me, it was very threatening because it seemed like a far-reaching maneuver to try and whittle away at our sovereignty. But it is one of the tentacles and one of the pieces of the puzzle for the New World Order.
All right, everyone, it's time for the Thought of the Dave. Thought of the Dave happens almost every night at this time, where I ask a Facebook question in my Thought of the Dave, and you guys come along and answer it. Jamie, I figured I'd keep you along for this one, because this one could be a little fun, as we got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal's Cuter Rebra playing in the background.
Okay.
What do you think of, before we get to that, what do you think of Bumblefoot's new band, Sons of Apollo?
I dig it. I like it a lot. I think it's great. That guy is so all over the map, man. He one project to the next. He does so many different things. I love it. He told me to tell you hi, by the way.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah, he's good people. I chatted with him there, and I'm glad you had a chance to meet up with him when he was down there for his solo tour.
Yeah, it was fun. It was just him and a guitar, man. It was great.
Yeah, I wanted to see that in Seattle, but I think Sons of Apollo is coming up to Seattle this summer. They're planning on it, I think, or the fall. So I'm going to have to get down for that. All right, Thought of the Dave. We did this one yesterday, but because it got a little heated yesterday and we ended up going to overtime, I kind of overstepped the boundary and didn't get to do this. So the question of the Dave, or the Thought of the Dave yesterday, was, which conspiracy theory do you believe the most, and why? Jamie, out of all the conspiracy theories out there, what's your favorite one that you believe the most?
Oh, let's see. I actually answered that post online, and I said there's too many. But my favorite, I wouldn't say favorite, because I don't like them. I don't like conspiracies, especially governmental conspiracies. But I think the one, that piques my interest the most is the Kennedy assassination. Really, I think because it was so public, it happened in broad daylight, and it was in a time where times were simpler, and it was much harder to bury evidence and things like that. And so I think, and subsequently now we know that the FBI was in fact investigating multiple shooters, and they believed that there were multiple shooters. So, but that's always been from a trivial perspective, that's always been one of my favorite ones. What's yours?
Well, I am and I say this while gritting my teeth a little bit, okay? I'm a 9/11 guy. I really am a 9/11. No disrespect to any of the innocent people who died that day, including the firefighters. Were 343 of them, but there's just too many unsolved questions there for me surrounding Building 7, it free-falling when there are so many brilliant people out there, especially architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, that say it's impossible for the building to fall at that. The fact that there was thermite found on a lot of the steel columns that they tried to cover up. And probably the biggest one, and this is what woke it up for me, and I mentioned this last night on the air, was the fact that simultaneously the CBC and CNN, with two different reporters, were running news that Building 7 had fallen, and on the BBC feed you could see Building 7 behind her on the live shot, and it was still standing. And then all of a sudden her feed went haywire.
Right.
So 9/11 for me.
Yeah. And by the way, incidentally, I agree with you 100%. And I've gone on record for many years stating that I believe 9/11 was an inside job. I don't have there's no question or doubt in my mind about that. And you're right. Building 7 was one of the big red flags in that. So was the plane at the Pentagon, and all the crash sites, and just hundreds and hundreds of bulletin points on that one that just don't add up. And it's unfortunate. I guess the reason I don't say favorite is because for me it's not really a trivial matter. It happened during my adult life, and the Kennedy one happened when I was very young. All that was happening, so I don't. I'm detached from the Kennedy thing a little bit, but the 9/11 thing, yes, it is the biggest one in my world for sure, definitely.
All right, I'm going to get to some of the people here, and every now and again we'll jump on in. I'm going to race through because there is a lot of them, and we only got about 6 minutes here. So Neil says, without a doubt, Agenda 21. We've already just talked about that. Matthew says, I believe there is a deliberate effort to dumb down society to make it more dependent on government and big corporations. Well, we kind of got into that tonight as well. Ron Moniak says, Justin Fidel Trudeau will save Canada. He is a traitor to the nation and has lost Canada for good. Oh, and Flat Earth. Because yeah, that's just Ron. He almost died a couple of weeks ago. So, due to blood clots, but he's getting better now. Kevin Liggett, a good Texan who has a high-quality beard, the official beard of Spaced Out Radio, says, Las Vegas shooting would be the most recent, I believe, to be a conspiracy for liberals to take away gun rights. Nothing adds up. Now, this is close to you. Do you agree with that one?
Well, I'd rather not comment on the Vegas shooting for personal reasons, but I'm open to all ideas, but the evidence really isn't in for me on any Vegas stuff, to be honest. And I knew people there, so I'd rather not get into that one.
All right, Paul says, Solar Warden and the Secret Space Program, because it's really cool and I want to believe. Also, Sasquatch is real. I believe there is a secret space program. That's a good one. Solar Warden is pretty cool. And, of course, I've seen Sasquatch, so obviously I think that's real, too. Buffy says the Sandy Hook shooting. That one's kind of odd as well. That one's kind of odd.
I'm on board with that one. I really researched that one a lot, and much like 9/11, I found that there were just way, way too many real questions that to date have not been answered. So I too question that one. As horrible as it sounds, I really do.
All right. Nikki and Bill say they believe that we are seeds planted by the former inhabitants of Mars. Well, that's kind of interesting. All right. Kennedy assassination, not just Oswald. That came up a number of times as well. Let's see what Jay has to say here. This is the start of a new conspiracy. This is why we don't see aliens. They find out how we are like, and they say this is the other. What the hell are you trying to say here, Jay? That doesn't make sense. Never mind what Jay says. His doesn't count. All right, Joseph, I believe 9/11 was a CIA attack on America to cause a national fear, vengefulness, and rage so that we could go to the Middle Eastern theater and take control of Iraqi oil. You know, that's a good one. Michael follows up with that, says 9/11 is almost beyond a theory. I've researched it quite a lot actually, and some of the things the government was doing that led up to 9/11. I never found any evidence of CIA involvement, but it may be likely that they may have known ahead of time. Interesting. All right. Moving on. Lucille says, that is an Imran, but get the jive, and yeah, got a few. What the hell does that mean, Lucille? I got to pre-read these sometimes. I really do. All right. David Wenbert says, I believe that the conspiracy factualists have it pretty much right of the time. Pretty much of the time. Most of the conspiracy facts circulating out there are not really unrelated, isolated situations. It's really just one big hidden truth, and all the other conspiracy facts are actually subsets of that one. The big hidden truth is the extraterrestrial presence. Once you understand the abductions, the hybridization, the infiltration, colonization, that leads to then everything else. Yes, aliens are here. That one I believe. Elizabeth says, Dave's hair intends to grow until it takes over the planet and then the solar system and then the entire universe. I'm growing my hair that long, James. I'm growing it that long.
Well, that does scare me.
Well, you can braid it down in Texas for me, my friend. All right.
I'll tell you what, let's find a nice cowgirl to do that for you when you come visit.
All right. I'm okay with that.
All right.
Lewis says the Russians, U.S. election meddling. Russia has done this to other countries, and so has the U.S., so it's real. And let's see here. Barry says that Trump won the election. So, what do I fire back? Now, we're Canadian here. We're not turning this into another Trump thing. Do you really want this? Because I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And that was me putting a picture of Justin Trudeau with a Canadian flag on the moon saying, one small step for people, one giant leap for people kind.
Awesome.
And on that note, my friend, we fired up Some Little Brother Is Watching by Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL. Appreciate you coming on, bud.
Yes, sir.
It's always a good time. Your next date on this show will be Thursday, March 15th. Third Thursday of the month, Jamie Sexton always comes on into Spaced Out Radio to hang out with us to talk about the latest in the alternative news. The Rebel Planet is what we call it. And Jamie will also put on display on his Facebook page his Cupid Wings bow and arrow. He will
coming soon.
Exactly. Had to get that in there one final time, my friend. All right. Tomorrow night on the program, we have open lines all night long. I want you to call in. I know Eric with a K will at least call in with a 2.5-hour call, so there will be about 25 minutes for the rest of you to call in. And I mean that with all due respect, Eric with a K. Open lines tomorrow night. I look forward to all of you joining me as well. Tell your friends. Tell them to come hang out with us after the show tomorrow night. We're going to rock out as well. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL playing in the background. Little brother is watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. We get our horns up for Mr. Bumblefoot each and every night. I want to say a big thank you to absolutely everyone tonight for joining on in, the phone calls, your questions in the chat rooms. Big thank you to everyone listening at home, at work, in your cars, to everyone on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and at hashtag Spaced Out Radio for participating tonight. Everybody on Periscope.tv for watching us live. Thank you so much. Everybody in Spreaker and the Veterans Club, the SOR Space Travelers on Facebook. You made it a lot of fun tonight. I got to go ghost hunting. I got to go figure out what's going on at the wife's friend's house. So, I got to get out of here. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. You have a good night. Rock it on out, Mr. B.